call is now being recorded.
Good afternoon to one and all. It gives me an immense pleasure to welcome you all for this 1 month gender sensitization and capacity building program on gender, society, economy, and polity, organized by Department of Women's Studies, Bhadidasa University, Center for Women's Studies, and National Service Scheme of Kaveri College for Women, and Regional Association for Women's Studies. I welcome you all. May I now request Professor N. Manimekhalai, Dean, Faculty of Arts, Director and Head, Department of Women's Studies, to render welcome address. Welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Neela. And again, I reiterate the kind of support system you have been rendering from college and constantly working on this, right from preparing the invitation and getting the doubts cleared, etc., etc. So thank you once again, Dr. Neela. And it is my pleasant duty to welcome the resource person today, Dr. Srinivasa Rao, who is the head department of history, Bharathidasan University, and we'll be talking on the topic, an important topic, understanding the layer of discrimination in science and technology in a gender and subaltern perspective. And we did have a discussion on STEM, gender concerns. So where Professor Rita John from Madras University spoke at length about the kind of organized and systematic discrimination that is happening way back, right from the history, where how Madame Curie wasn't recognized and also gone down to the current contemporary issues. So today we are going to have the discussion on the layer of discrimination, and it is true that the community or the society is not homogeneous. We have people, but people belong to different layers, and accordingly they are being forced to face discrimination in the context of the historical the power structure of the society. And that is why I keep saying that the kind of positive discrimination happening in the society is to compensate for the historical disadvantage. So we are going to listen to that particular aspect with respect to the science and technology today from Dr. Srinivasa Rao. So on behalf of all the participants and the organizing departments, I welcome you, Dr. Rao, for this program, and will be happy to listen to you. And I also welcome all my colleagues from the Department of Women's Studies, Dr. Burgeshwari, Dr. Shubha, Dr. Shamim, and others, and my students, scholars, and Dr. Neela, who is coordinating from Kaveri College side, and also the representatives from Kaveri College, and the participants from all over the country, from different parts of the state, country, and many from the northeast also are here, and South India, North India. Everybody, every region is represented. So that is the speciality of this program. We will keep getting more participants joining. Maybe some problem would be there, and they will join. There will be around 150 or odd. So you will, they will definitely be reaping some fruits listening to Dr. Rao. Now, okay, it is over to Neela, please.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for your warm welcome. May I now request Dr. S. Shubha, Assistant Professor, Department of Women's Studies, to introduce our today's resource person. Welcome you, ma'am.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Neela. A very good afternoon to all. Today, I'm very happy to introduce our friend Dr. Rao. He's a very energetic and very enthusiastic person. Presently, he is a head department of history, and he has more than 10 years of experience both teaching and research. And also, apart from academic responsibility, Rao also holding many additional responsibilities, such as deputy warden of Bharathidasan University Bhavani Hostel, coordinator of the online courses of Department of History and controller of the Environmental Club of Department of History, and executive committee member in Green and Clean Initiative of Paradas University. His contribution in that committee is enormous and very alternative in way, and also he is working as a placement cell coordinator of the department, and NAC coordinator, and coordinator of all external activities, and coordinator of the examination, and he was the principal in charge at Paradas University Model College, Vedaranyam, Nagapattinam, and library in charge of Department of History, and also the History Club. And apart from that, his specializations are history of science and technology, modern India, national movement, and the subaltern technologies. And he published more than 25 research articles, book chapters, and popular writing in various popular journals and Wire and many other platforms. And Dr. Rao received and did the major research project from UGC, history of the innovative tradition of subaltern communities in South India, the case of Tamil Nadu, and Rao has one of his major achievement, and he is the awardee of International Scholar of the Society for History of Technology, USA, from January 2018 of 2019 December, and he organized many seminars, workshops, and conferences, more than 9, and various funding agencies, ICHR, UGC, National Human Rights Commission, and etc. And Dr. Rao is participated in more than 75 public lectures, academic lectures in various bodies because of his expertise, knowledge in history and science and technology. And this way, today we are happy to invite Dr. Srinivasa Rao to delivering lecture in this particular title of today's session. Welcome, Dr. Rao. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am, for your nice introduction. May I now request today's eminent resource person, Dr. Srinivasa Rao, Head Department of History, Bhadras University, to take over the session. Welcome you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Well, I thank Manimekhalai Madam for giving this opportunity. Well, at the outset, I must say that I'm yet to be expert in the subject that I chose to speak. However, I am thinking of sharing a few of the ideas that I have. Well, straight away, I would like to say that history of science and technology, sociology of science and technology, anthropology of science and technology, to a large extent proved that science and technology are not free from the human agency's priorities. So if that is the case, India is not an exception. Nowhere in the world, any society is not an exception. So when the society, science and technology are created, they are created according to a social context or impacted by the social context. From the very idea of inception to the objections we raise to the problems science and technology creates after it is employed in the society. So which means from the very beginning, meanings and functions are being allocated to science. And even after creating and producing and employing, after employing, society responds to that, and society starts allocating meanings and functions to the science and technology. And also there is the question of authorship. Who creates science and technology? Why certain sections of society will have the ability or acquire the ability or claim the ability of creating science and technology is that ability of creating science and technology, or acquiring science and technology, or acquiring knowledge is inherent in certain sections of the society, is it racial or caste or gender, or is this ability, acquiring ability or claiming ability, is to do with the social, appropriation, the power that is inbuilt or power that is created, because the very power of appropriating the knowledge is not across the society, is not the same. Certain sections will have the power of appropriating the science and technology. So in the process of appropriating the science and technology, they will have the ability of creating science and technology, or the opportunity of creating science and technology. Later that is actually normalized as natural ability. So this is across the societies, that is the same. The dominant race will create the white race, for example. They are the natural inherence of science and technology, and they will have the ability, and that ability is quite normal to them. So that is the case with, compared to that of the Afro-American black woman. The white woman does the same. Compared to that of the Dalit woman, the upper caste woman does the same. Compared to that of the upper caste Dalit men here, the upper caste man does the same. So there is this authority. So, authority or authorship of science and technology. So this authorship, how does it come? That is very important question to talk about. And apart from that, science and technology, be it where it is created, the social context, as I've already made a point, will have an important impact. Or in fact, social context will determine what kind of functions we allocate, what kind of meanings we derive from science and technology, or we allocate to science and technology. So whether it is created in a particular social context or imported from a social context, either we will be trying to relocate. If it is imported, we are trying to relocate science and technology into a particular social context. That social context will have an impact on the way we allocate functions, we read the meanings, and we allocate the meanings. So many things happens here. Now, just let me go back to the pre-modern times of Indian science and technology, broadly divided into upper caste dominated classical science and Sudra Atisudra produced indigenous technology, arts and crafts, or indigenous techniques. These are the broad two categories in India we see. So in this, when the very division of Indian science and technology into the classical science and that of the indigenous science and technology, or the arts and crafts, there itself the foundations of inequality are laid. The earlier, that is the classical science, is created by the people who believes that it is natural to do science for them. And the working class, or the Sudra Atisudra class, creates technology in order to serve the purpose in life. That is to say that the classical science is recognized as something that is to do with the mind, theorization, and philosophy and knowledge. Indigenous science and technology is to do with something, something just producing something that may not be as important as the mind work does. It is a hand work, while the classical science is to do with the mind. So the classical science is the science of the high. The indigenous technologies or the techniques or the systems of production of the low. So therefore, this category that was there from the beginning continue to do so even till today. Of course, there is some amount of entry of the so-called Sudras into that of the classical science. We cannot deny that, but the percentage is quite low. So therefore, this mind-hand categorization, the binary, is very dangerous, and so that actually allows the monopoly of the classical science by the upper caste and closing the gates for the rest for the classical science, that is actually basic sciences, chemistry, mathematics, and physics, and so on and so forth. So that is still a monopoly of 70% of the sciences are monopoly on these sciences are held by the upper caste or caste Hindus who are called intermediary caste. Today are very less, but they are also going into that area. So now, is this monopoly that we talk about by the upper caste even over the upper caste women? The upper caste women who are called as daughters of Leelavati, that will come to that concept later. So daughters of Leelavati are not able to survive, or not able to strike the equality with that of the men, even hailing from the upper caste community. So there is this male men-women binary that we need to look into. So where this monopoly comes in, how this monopoly is acquired. See, monopoly comes primarily from the Manu's restrictions on the very idea of knowledge. That is umbrella restriction. That is just, it is said that the Vedas, but Veda is equal to knowledge. So every knowledge that is actually for a long time till the modernity comes into India, that is the modernization enters into India. Knowledge, so-called knowledge, entire gamut of knowledge, entire umbrella of knowledge is kept away from the reach of the Sudra and Adisudra. Even the two other classes also, they were only the Kshatriyas were allowed to join with the Brahmins for the purpose of king or the ruler supposed to have the knowledge apart from having the skills of ruling. Apart from that knowledge, so that requirement allowed them to take into the structure. Otherwise, they are also Kshatriyas are not that powerful in terms of climbing the equality to that of knowledge. So Manu's restrictions are still continuous, but they are not continuous as rude as they are said by Manu, but they get the different form and shape. They are secular, or they are invisible, they are rationalized, they are normalized. So the monopoly over science and technology, the base comes from the Manu's restrictions, but the same cannot be continued. Manu's restrictions, like you can if someone hears the recitation of the Vedas, you have to punish them, or you have to very rude punishments are prescribed in his restrictions. But yet, if you try to, given the change in society, given the civilized society is drastically changed. Those kind of rude punishments, repetition of them in the form that they were prescribed in the text cannot be allowed, because even if somebody wanted to say the same Manu's restrictions needed to be repeated, they will be criticized, because the pre-modern society and the modern society are not the same, because the civilized society cannot be agreeing to those kind of restrictions. So the civilized society reforms itself in order to present itself as fresh, so that the rudity is removed from the restrictions. So there is a certain amount of rudity in the restrictions of Manu. Those rudity are removed, and a fresh form of restrictions, which are invisible, you may not see them, but very powerful and dangerous. So that is how it gave them the monopoly. These invisible Manu's restrictions by the modern Manuvadis. Modern Manuvadis need not have to be a typical typical radical Hindu, but also he can be a scientist who just is very concerned about his religion, culture, and social positions, and they can be a Manuvadi, and like that you can have a policy maker, you can have a politician, you can have anybody. All of them are combinedly can be called as modern Manuvadis. Their modern Manuvadis are not like that of the Manu, but they are different, but they certainly make sure that they do not lose the total monopoly over the knowledge that was handed over to them from their earlier ancestors. So that is very important. So in that, where the woman is certainly not there in the pre-modern science. And look at the indigenous science and indigenous technology also. Is women is given equal space in indigenous technology as a practitioner, as a contributor, in the entire gamut of the indigenous science and technology, that is Sudra, Ati Sudras, or the what you call OBC, all these Dalits and Adivasis we call come to. So it is also, I found that the level of allowing the woman into even into the indigenous arts and crafts, that is alternative science, alternative technologies in this country, that is compared to that of the modern science. When you divide the science and technology into the modern technology and the indigenous technology, so the entire gamut of indigenous technology, in that what is the role of women? So there also the the participation of the women, recognition of the women is sort of, you know, we can say that some 50%, 40% is not 100%. Reason we can very well guess that all these Sudras and Ati Sudras are by culture, by way of life, are the serious followers of the Hinduism. So therefore, they also follow the same restrictions. They put same restrictions unless and until they are pressurized to allow the women. So there is a lot of work, and if there is only 2 male and female in the home, female has to be allowed to do some work in the workshop. Otherwise, the workshop is a holy workshop. So our woman need not have to have, because woman is not masculine, so woman cannot deal with the machines, if at all. Even a small instrument that we use to make some agricultural implement, even that also cannot be dealt by the male, female. So therefore, that is no. This is a kind of, you know, given understanding to male, to the culture. It is not that male already tested what is the what is the potential of the woman, whether she can do or not. It's not that it is tested, but it is already given understanding. That understanding is just like that, borrowed and implemented, and then it is borrowed and becomes a cultural, you know, sort of a restriction. Once it is borrowed, it becomes a cultural set of restriction, because the Sudras and Ati Sudras are unfortunately, you know, they also follow the same religion and culture, and for them the thought is actually quite restricted. He's supposed to follow what the master says. They're supposed to follow what the culturally high says. So therefore, it is their thought. Are they allowed to apply their thought on mind to investigate, to examine what is the capacity of the woman, what is the potential of the woman? Will they be able to contribute to the work that I am doing at home? I mean, cottage industry I am referring to. So that is also restricted. So therefore, coming back to the modern Manavadis, so these restrictions are helping them to stick on to the monopoly that they wanted to have for a long time. And during colonial time, what happened again? Introduction of the modern science, immediately from the classical to that of the modern science. The monopoly that the upper caste were having, as soon as classic comes to the indigenous arts and crafts, they got modernized. They were not as they were, they got modernized. In the process of modernization, what happened? The authors, the creators, the owners of indigenous technology lost the ownership, and this ownership has gone to the upper caste again. That is modernization. Say, for example, if you have a handloom when become a power loom are operated by the engineers. So therefore, who is the engineer? Engineer was primarily coming from the engineering colleges. Now from say 1890s to 1930s and 20s, you have the Sudras and Ati Sudras who are not going into the government engineering colleges. So where are they? They are getting training as the technicians, supervisors, and mechanics. So they got replaced in some area from their original work, but they're not doing original work. They emerge into different technicians while they are not, while they lost the mastership over the authorship over the technology or the techniques that they were created, they created, and that ownership or the authorship or the mastership has gone to the upper caste again. That is, emergence of engineering has taken away the authorship of the indigenous communities or the authors of the indigenous crafts and science, crafts and arts to that of the upper class engineers. There also the authorship is lost. So here also women is very less. So therefore, either classical science or the modern engineering, in both these areas, women, Sudras or Sudras or Dalits or OBC, whatever you call, they completely may not be missing, but majorly missing from this area, and that missing from that these two disciplines or two knowledge systems is not natural. Not one cannot say that a handloomer, if given the proper education along with the upper caste, would not be able to emerge as an engineer. That is a wrong argument to make. But however, that's what has happened. British also never interested. In fact, when the modern English education was introduced in 1835, it is a sort of democratization of the education here in this country. But that democratization is controlled. And understand, when British also has introduced or followed the principle of two languages policy in education, English for the upper caste and the vernacular for the lower caste. Even till today, that difference carries. Today, if you have an engineer from the OBC community, he is an engineer in the vernacular language, and if you have an engineer in the upper caste, he is an engineer who is having the ability of being a global citizen. So which means, in this two languages policy that we continue even till today, that there is an inbuilt discrimination. So this man is a engineer in the vernacular languages, would not be able to cross the borders. The same policy that was introduced by the British, though the lot of infiltration, a lot of entry of the OBCs and the so-called the subalterns into the engineering and sciences, and they on themselves are able to pick up language and English, and there are engineers, of course, but they are getting recognized as engineers or not, or the upper caste person is recognizing a subaltern person equal to that of him as an engineer or scientist. We do not know. Some studies have come out, but it is proved that that is not the case. So therefore, that problem, given the democratization, was controlled by the people who wanted to have such a control, because losing such a control over the science and technology would be creating an equal society. Even British Prime Minister also today at this point in time says inequality is very important for the society. So when you have a British Prime Minister saying, why not a person in India can also repeat the same thing? I believe personally that many people who wanted to have the inequality as it is on this society would be, especially those people who belongs to the higher social positions, would wanted to say it out loud, but they cannot say it out loud because civilization restricts their language or the thought or the intent, because you cannot say inequality is very important in society. So therefore they are restricted by the civilizational standards of the present day civilization. Otherwise one would wanted to say what they wanted to say, because that's what they have in their mind. So the inventors have become supervisors, technicians, mechanics. So that also they lost. When you look at the binary between not only men and women, we are also simultaneously looking at the binary between the upper caste man and the subaltern man, and the even also the upper caste woman and subaltern woman also we have to simultaneously look at to understand the layers of discrimination. So apart from that, one very important aspect as far the Indian society is concerned, that unfortunately science and technology, especially science or even technology, are divided into this. This has happened at the freedom struggle in the colonial times. Science is divided into two again. One is the scientific rationalism, which is which comes out of science. The way you do science produces reason, logic. So therefore, without reason, logic, there is no scientist, or there is no science. So there is a scientific rationalism and there is a science. That is called as Baconian science. Francis Bacon proposes that the science is knowledge. So therefore, you have to use the science to produce the material wealth. So that is equal to power. So that we call Baconian science. And I am saying, though earlier nobody said, I'm saying the other one as a Bertrand Russell science. Bertrand Russell science is a scientific method. His scientific method is that the way you do the science, the same method can be applied to understand the unequal structures of the society. So therefore, when you do the science, you are a scientist of science as well as a owner of or the practitioner of scientific rationalism. But what happened is that in India, this is already proved by the Martin Singer and M.N. Srinivas, that in India what happens is that the scientist in India compartmentalizes themselves into, that is not just only case with the dominant upper caste men who are the dominant majority in science in India. Even male, even female also, even the woman from the upper caste does the same. What do they do is that they separate the science, the individuality into two. That is the scientist in the laboratory and workspace and the religious person in the private life. So this compartmentalization of life into rational life and religious life has resulted in accommodating the culture without contradictions in oneself. So that has done large damage to the society. I believe that is very important. Jawaharlal Nehru and Puswamitra Bhargava have tried a lot to introduce or to promote the scientific temper in this country, but what Nehru wanted both science for the prosperity of the nation and scientific temper for the transformation of the nation. Both he wanted, but most of the scientists did not give importance to the latter. Science was used to prosper for the prosperity of the nation, but scientific temper was not used for the transformation of the nation. Now, why I mention this and why I find it is problematic is that most of the women problems today, say for example, if a female member, I will come to C.V. Raman, who actually discriminated a woman, who did not allow a woman because she is woman to join with him or join into the institute as the head of the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. So I'll come to that later. But why such a kind of unchanged minds, unchanged attitude remain despite being a scientist? What contributes to that? What stops a scientist from transforming himself into a person who respects the restricted cultural norms to that of a person who opens up the mind to understand the existing, things that are existing in front of one's own eyes, that look at the society. It is after all a discriminative society. There are ivory towers, there are systems of restriction, there are structures of restriction, there are structures of discrimination existing in front of our eyes. But a scientist or a technologist or an engineer refuses to transform their mind, change their mind. So it bothers me. It could have bothered Jawaharlal Nehru. It could have been bothering many people like the Bolkar and Govind Pansare and Lankesh. So all these people could have, many scientists today are many. There are scientists. I'm not saying all scientists are not rationalists, but there are plenty of them. As I told you, Puswamitra Bhargava is one of the important person who is responsible for taking the 51AH article that that obligates the government to promote the scientific temper among the citizens, but that is being ignored, we all know. So however, the point is, why a scientist refuses to transform himself or herself from being a religious person to that of a rational person? Because that is what they do. In everyday life, they do science. That science, more than a social scientist like me, like many of you who are listening to me, would have been their best responsibility, or first responsibility, to transform self first into a rational person, then become a person who is supposed to be contributing to us. So if you try to see women as an agent or woman as a subject who has been discriminated, so what are the reasons for the discrimination? How do you understand the discrimination? Application of rationalism to understand the system of discrimination, which can be demolished through the application of reason and logic, or the scientific rationalism, is totally locked up or kept somewhere else, because that becomes dangerous if you create such kind of a society that is rationally equal society. Both genders are rationally equal. Both are thinking persons. All people from all castes are thinking persons. So if that happens, that will be collapsing that will be attacking on the monopoly of the thinking sections in the society. Therefore, they wantedly renounced or wantedly ignored the prime responsibility of promoting scientific temper among them. So this I did not see alone in scientific male scientists, but also in the female community, also especially the upper caste, that is also there with them. So as I told you, there is I cannot totally say that the subaltern men are 100% progressive. There is also a problem with them, as I told, as I mentioned. But let me give you one example where I did Madam Shubha has mentioned about my project. I did a project on subaltern innovative techniques in South India. In that, I found that one person who is actually producing wooden bodies for the musical instruments, chanda or drum, dolak, and mrudangam, all these things. He is having a workshop nearby his home. We call them as cottages. And when I interviewed, that person has said, "So why are you allowing your daughter and wife into the workshop?" After there is change in the nature of the craft and arts and crafts in the present times, because earlier there was just handwork. Now there is a machine work. Whether it is handwork and machine work, what happens is that the person who I'm interviewing, he was saying, look, this is, talking about musical instruments. These musical instruments, he was saying, these were being produced for the holy purpose. Therefore, I cannot allow women into the workshop. And this is a subaltern person. So, which means, as far as, there are women engineers, I am not saying there are women scientists, I am not saying there are students, number of students who are into engineering, I am not talking about that. How there is a continuity in the areas we believe that they should not have continued even till today. So how that is happening, where we have to take that responsibility, that I have to connect it to the scientist and a woman scientist who have already acquired the ability of dealing with the scientific rationalism, and they would have applied the same, or they would have taken the responsibility of transforming the society by explaining the male about how this, you are discriminating women, this is unfair, this is how to have to deal with this is how to understand, this is logically how to approach, this is how you understand the discrimination. Once you understand the discrimination, you slowly, if not at one point in time, you slowly be reducing the amount of discrimination, at least the women's face at home. So like that, I don't even put the subaltern men aside in terms of keeping the women under control or away from the systems of knowledge. Coming to the discrimination that exists in the scientific institutions. In the colonial times, first, as I've already told, from the classical science, there is an immediate jump to the modern science, mostly by the Brahmins, that we all know. I need not have to explain. So because it's give the advantage to them because they're already knowledge people with knowledge. So it will be easy for them to acquire the new knowledge. So even if it is modern, there is a jump. So that jump is resulted early jump resulted in the monopoly. So they have become global citizens, as I told you, global citizens. And the upper caste women are also becoming global citizens. As early as in the last decades of 19th century, of course, women are one or two, but male, upper caste male are more. So therefore, yet both are entering into the modern science. Both upper caste, male and female, are entering into science and technology that was introduced along with the modern education in this country in 1835. So, say by 1890s, you have first Anandi Bai Joshi is a first medical student. So she is immediately became a global citizen along with the others. So therefore, there isn't a much gap. However, how she was treated is totally different. But there isn't a much gap between the male and female in terms of upper caste entering into the modern science and engineering. So you have, however, visible discrimination is quite, you can see. Now you have the P.C. Ray, Joshi Bose, Mahendralal Sarkar, Nagananda, C.V. Raman, Srinivas Ramanujan, the list is a lot. Along that, you have also daughters of Leelavati. So daughters of Leelavati. Leelavati is a daughter of the Bhaskaracharya II of the 12th century. So why we are calling modern day women scientists as daughters of Leelavati? In this, not only scientists but also women engineer also combinedly called as daughters of Leelavati. But unfortunately, we do not have subaltern daughters of Leelavati. We only have mostly, even if the mostly dominant women scientists are mostly dominant upper caste Leelavati, daughters of Leelavati. Subaltern daughters of Leelavatis are also there, but their existence is quite minimal. So if you look at the layers, chronology of visibility, if you look at, you have the upper caste male who becomes scientists early, then the upper caste female becomes the scientist early, and they acquire the visibility. And even till today, we are looking into the whether we can see the subaltern daughters of Leelavati or not, or they might be existing as students, as researchers, but scientist and recognized engineer is different from that of just a student of chemistry, student of physics, or student of mathematics, or a researcher of the mathematics. I found that when you compare that of the upper caste women and the subaltern women, when we talk about upper caste women, we're talking about recognized, popular, and established scientists and engineers. When we talk about the subaltern scientists and engineers, we are talking about talking about where are they? They are as teachers, professors in the universities, maybe researchers. They can also be called as scientists, and maybe as students, maybe as researchers. So we are looking for data to prove that whether there are daughters of subaltern daughters of Leelavati. Yes, there are, but they are just as teachers, professors, and researchers, but not as a recognized or an established scientists and engineers. So that is still a problem. So anyway, so Leelavatis, modern day Leelavatis are modern. The upper caste female who entered into the engineering sciences as early as the last decade of 19th century. So this Daughters of Leelavati is actually a work produced especially with this title. The INSA, that is the Indian National Science Academy, and the Indian Science Academy of Bangalore and the Indian National Science Academy of Delhi, they combinedly produced, edited by Rohini Godbole and Ram Ramaswamy. They combinedly have produced a book called Daughters of Leelavati. That means they have, for the first time, produced the list of Indian scientists, recognized Indian scientists as well as engineers, that is women engineers, women scientists. So the list is of 100 women, and mostly the purpose of creating the book called Daughters of Leelavati, which is consisting of 100 women engineers and scientists. I'll just read what is the purpose of the book, that is borrowed from the preface of the book. It says, the first idea was to put together a collection of biographical sketches of influential Indian women scientists of the earlier generations to underline the fact that it is possible to find role models within the country. One does not have to look only towards the Curies, Franklins, and Hodgins, impressive scientists though they are all, but to find women scientists of substance, we felt that it was important for the younger girls with research ambitions to know of women who functioned and achieved in Indian social and academic environment. This is the purpose of producing or bringing together the Indian women scientists and engineers together in 2008. So the book is combinedly called as Daughters of Leelavati. Now, the last three, four letters, 3-4 words, if you combine to take, they wanted to, the intention of the authors or the intention of the editors of the Daughters of Leelavati is that Indians, within the Indian social academic environment, there are 100 scientists. So why are you looking for an inspiration into a different social and academic environment? That means you can take the Indian scientists and engineers as an inspiration. You need not have to, as it mentioned here, you need not have to look for Madame Curie, Marie Curie, or Franklins or Hodgins to take inspiration, but you can see Janaki Ammal, Annai Mani, and Lata Chandrasekhar, Ashmita Chatterjee, all these women are here. So therefore, why are you, when they are all here, why are you looking for inspiration from another social and academic context? Within the Indian social academic context, there are women scientists, 100 of them have emerged. So you can locate yourself into the same social context and an academic context, and you can become a scientist and engineer. This emphasis on putting a sort of an imposition on the women, girls, or who are the young researchers, that to say you do science within India, but when you look at the social context and academic context, not dramatically changed, that is capable of guaranteeing a woman scientist or an engineer, look, there is no problem at all. You come, the social context and the academic context is not discriminatory at all. So you need not have to worry. So therefore you come and do research the way you want it here. So that is what the intention of this Daughters of Leelavati, the 100 women scientists and engineers biographies. So there are biographical sketches of 100 women scientists, 100 women scientists and engineers. Some of them are from the pre-colonial, post-independent times. Some of them are, most of them are from the present times, that is the contemporary times of India, are doing science now. So editors claimed that they could not be as diverse they wanted to be, as diverse as they wanted to be, because the diversity in the scientific community among the women is not visible. Mostly, again, among the 100, one is probably 1 or 2 are Christians, 2 are Muslim, rest of them are all Brahmin or the upper caste daughters of Leelavati. So they themselves have agreed, both the Rohini Godbole and Ram Ramswamy have agreed that we could not be as diverse as we wanted to be. Apart from that, there are other interesting points they made in the preface, is that they could not be truly representative because of the skewed regional social bias within the Indian scientific community. This they have agreed in the preface. There is a skewed regional and social bias within the Indian scientific community. That they have agreed. Apart from that, they have also stated women scientists were not sympathetic to the efforts and argued that such an exercise do more harm than the good. So women scientists themselves are arguing when the idea of bringing all the 100 scientists, women scientists and engineers together, these editors of the Daughters of Leelavati says that they were not sympathetic. Women scientists were not sympathetic to the idea of bringing these biographical sketches together, and also argue that such an exercise do more harm than good. I don't understand why they are not sympathetic if they are concerned about becoming visible, or if they are concerned about striking equality with that of male counterparts, and bringing out these sketches, how it is, how it does any harm to the general society, I don't understand. So what is going through their minds, I don't understand, but we can guess, we can read what their mind might be thinking about, why are they opposing to such a effort. So we can say that there are, apart from that, there is also one point that is mentioned. Not all women scientists who are signing well are interested in becoming the part of the list. That they also mentioned. They don't want to be part of the list. They achieve great, but they don't want to be listed in the Daughters of Leelavati, or they don't want to submit their biographies into the Daughters of Leelavati. So this is what is very, when you look at the Daughters of Leelavati of the upper caste or upper class Daughters of Leelavati, when we look at the binary between male, when we can't start just looking at the binary between the male and female discrimination, these things would not come out. In fact, Meera Kosambi, the daughter of D.D. Kosambi, wrote an article on Anandibai Joshi. She has understood how the Joshi is struggling between being a progressive woman and wanted to be a traditional woman at the same time. That's why the article or the book she brought in, she called it as a fragmented feminism. The fragmented feminism is that Joshi wanted to be the progressive woman one time, and at the same time she wanted to be a traditional woman. So this is the dilemma that is there, and as I told you, that is the same dilemma, or this dilemma, I don't think it is that is unavoidable, but it is intentional. The dilemma I'm talking about are why one time you want to be so progressive and at the same time you want to be traditional, because both cannot go together, should not go together, logically should not go together. Many would claim that no, we are capable of taking both of them together. What is your problem? So most of the scientists who are religious at the same time, rational at the same time, would put the same argument. But however, the point is that the women, many scientists are not willing to join into the list of the Leelavatis. That is in 2008, not in the beginning of 20th century. 2008. So that means what was, so where is 2008? Where is Anandibai Joshi? Anandibai Joshi in 1880s, or at the end of 1880s. But in 2008, how can you resist yourself from becoming a visible woman scientist in 2008? So that I found a problem. So therefore, are the upper caste daughters of Leelavati are really wanted to climb the equality? If not, what is stopping them? What is restricting them? Are they still becoming the slaves of the cultural restrictions? Or are they compromising that it is very important to keep the life apart from my career and my being a scientist? Visibility is very important, but not at the cost of culture. So is that the thinking? I strongly believe that is a pattern of thinking. So all the, for my understanding, despite being a scientist or recognizable scientist, daughters of modern upper caste daughters of Leelavatis are still being governed by the socio-religious, cultural, patriarchal aspects. I strongly believe that. Otherwise, they would not be stopping themselves from becoming the equal persons with that of the male or anybody else for that matter. They can strike equality with that of a scientist from any foreign context or from this context also within India also. So I found it very strange why they are not courageous enough. That is in 2008 that they do not wanted to be visible. I do not wanted to strike the balance with that of the female counterparts. So, when the purpose of the book is, look at another politics here, when the purpose of the book is to influence many girls towards scientific research, science research, the purpose of the book, that is mentioned by the editors in the preface, the book especially limited to the persons like me, limited to persons like social scientists. The existence of the book is not much in the scientific and engineering institutions. This is where it has to be. If you wanted to say that, and otherwise probably it is just for the purpose of making a statement that we are creating these list of biographies of the scientists, women scientists, just to justify the book, not to serve the real purpose. That means by just reading a biography or autobiography of women scientist, what girl or what young woman becomes a scientist, which young woman becomes a scientist? No, they will be seeing the live examples. So even without going to the book, the daughters of Leelavati, the young girls can. So if that is the case, but that may be the case. But however, you have to see that there are women who have succeeded in India. So therefore, you have to look at that example. So to look at that example, you have to force the young researchers, young female researchers, to look into these examples. So to that, you have to make that every library where the science courses are offered, every library where the engineering courses are offered, the daughters of Leelavati is available. Or not only is available, you have to make sure at one point of time, both to the male and female. Female student also, male student also should learn to read the biographies of the women, so they would understand how they were discriminated, so that they would not discriminate their younger colleagues at this point in time. So it has to be made compulsory. The daughters of Leelavati should be made compulsory. It could have been a part of the syllabus in all engineering and scientific institutions. I don't think the IITs and Indian Institute of Science Education Research, these are the major institutions, are central government sponsored scientific institutions which are carrying the or TIFMA.
Dr. Rao, will you take 5 more minutes?
Yeah, I'll finish it. So like that, so such effort is not made and the purpose is not served. So apart from that, if you look at one important aspect that I was mentioning about C.V. Raman, where Kamala Bhagwat Kamala Bhagwat was also one of the students who approached, wanted to join with C.V. Raman. But C.V. Raman had later he joined her, but not as a PhD student, but as a student in the program, in the institute. This woman scientist, Kamala Bhagwat, or later known as Kamala Soni, when she was refused by C.V. Raman, she was saying that, I quote, she was delivering a lecture in around 1940s or 50s in the Indian Women Scientist Association. I quote, she says, though Raman was a great scientist, he was very narrow-minded. I can never forget the way he treated me just because I was woman. This was a great insult to me. The bias against women was so bad at that time. What can one expect if even a Nobel laureate behaves in such a manner? This is Kamala Bhagwat, a student who approached him to, in fact, there is also government inquiry that C.V. Raman was trying to be autocratic in the IISc as an institute director, that he was trying to develop his own physics department by dominating the rest of the colleagues and the researchers. So they have all combinedly appointed an Irwin committee. The Irwin committee has conducted the investigation, and it found that it is true, and he was asked to step down as a director. So this is the kind of discrimination that even the upper caste Leelavatis have faced in the hands of the male colleagues, despite being from the upper. However, so the modern Leelavatis, are the upper, most of the modern Leelavatis are upper caste daughters of Leelavatis. So as I found that, as Meera Kosambi found, Abbasur actually an anthropologist from Michigan University, I believe, and she conducted, she worked on Annamani, Lalita Chandrasekhar, and Asmita Chatterjee, all of them together, three of them together. She worked on them. She published a paper, and she found, in fact, I don't know why she left Kamala Soni from the list of women who worked with. Probably, I think she has not joined. Kamala Soni did not join with C.V. Raman for PhD, but these three are PhD students. So Abbasur has worked on these three of them, but mostly focused on Annamani, not on Lalita Chandrasekhar. Lalita Chandrasekhar is wife of Subramanya Chandrasekhar, who has got the Nobel Prize. So Lalita Chandrasekhar says that I have to sacrifice my marriage for my science for my husband's. So despite she was not interested, but however she voluntarily must have did. That's what she Abbasur also says. So Asmita Chatterjee, Annamani is only, I think, Christian, Syrian Christian. So Annamani is quite a complex kind of a woman, where she actually has rubbished. When she is actually, when Abbasur was doing research, she personally went and met her. She has made a statement that she has not faced any problem while doing her research from her male colleagues. That means she was saying that there is no gender bias at lab, and I mean, gender bias did not stop her from becoming a scientist. There is not. She is not completely said that the gender bias did not existing. She later agreed that it is existing everywhere, but she said that it cannot actually stop. Gender bias would not stop me from becoming a scientist. But this, how do you understand that? This is a typical, this is typical internalization of the culture, because internalization of the culture is very important. That means, so just because you become a scientist, you cannot totally keep yourself away from the culture, which is very dangerous for them, at least. I would not say whether it is dangerous or not. I feel that it is not dangerous at all. But our the new culture, if you keep the culture away, or if you start formulating the new culture, you are capable of forming a new culture that might be comfortable to you. I would not say you have to stick to the old cultural norms and structures. But however, she was, as like that of Anandi Bhai Joshi, Annamani also is trying to locate herself into the within the cultural frame and trying to balance herself as a woman, a successful woman is also a woman who respects the culture. So, in fact, I would like to point out that so these women in the modern, especially during the freedom struggle, they gone to the extent of hiding the gender discrimination, caste discrimination, regional discrimination, with an intention of, as like Abbasur says, with an intention of hiding is very important to give gain the self-confidence against the British. Because if you wanted to say that you have fractions within you that you're a woman scientist, you're fighting against the male scientists, then within the context of the nationalism, it will be very dangerous. So therefore, she says we have to hide our gender discrimination or regional discrimination or a caste discrimination with an intention of giving good impression to the national freedom struggle. There, I'll stop by quoting three quotes from the important persons of the colonial times. So I did not go to such an important aspect that I wanted to speak about the subaltern daughters of Leelavati. Probably later we can have, or somewhere else I'll talk about them. Abbasur in her article, she mentions about three important leaders at that point in time. So the three important leaders, one is Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi, she quotes, and I read, "As a nature has made men and women different, it is necessary to maintain the difference between education of the two. They are equal in life, but their functions differ. It is women's right to rule the home. Man is a master outside it. Man is a earner. Woman spends and saves. In this scheme of nature, and it is just as it should be, women should not have to earn her living." This is Mahatma Gandhi. Then Vivekananda. "Women should not be educated in modern science, but should train to educate of the family." This is Vivekananda. And Jawaharlal Nehru. Only I found him a bit radical compared to the above both of them. He was a bit radical while inaugurating a foundation laying ceremony of the College for Women in Allahabad. He says, "Women's place in the home and her duty was to be devoted wife. Bringing up the children is absurd." So these leaders at that point in time also not the leaders whose attitude or whose views would be supporting the women to be revolutionary. I think one have to give the benefit of doubt to those at that point of time. Can we expect a radical woman during the colonial times? Women scientist, a radical woman scientist during the colonial times may not be possible. However, for not being radical, can we only say that their culture is stopping them or their individuality is not helping them to be radical? Is it how far it is possible to be individually radical? How far it is impossible to be controlled by the culture? So this is what I have, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, sir, for your wonderful presentation. Participants, do you have any queries? You can unmute your mic and you can ask the queries.
Sir Srinivasan, thank you for your wonderful and vocabulary and Very nice presentation. Sir, with regard to the old Manu system and present day modern Manus, earlier it was not, it was institutionalized, but at present it is not institutionalized, number one. And modern day Manuvadis are almost nationalists in their nature. This is my observation. And second point which I would like to say here is that if you see the data of women scientists in CSIR, in 2004, it was 13% women, and 2008, it was 16%. I don't have data for 2020. DST, the percentage of scientists was only 18, increased to 20.8%. DAE, it was 16.5%, increased, but unfortunately decreased to 15%. DBT, 31%, it has come down to 27%. ICMR, fortunately, increased the percentage of women from 27% to 29%. ICAR, it is 8.5% to 14%. So this data which I am telling about the percentage of women scientists has marginally increased from 2004 to 2008. Recent data I don't have, but the rate of increase in the percentage of women scientists is not, say, palatable. It is not acceptable. Probably, as you said, that still there are modern Manus who are nationalists who indirectly try to restrict the entry of women into this science and technology. Sir, my question to you is this. Is this the discrimination among the caste is more dangerous, or the discrimination between men and women is more harmful and dangerous? Thank you, sir. I am Dr. B. Gopal Singh, professor from Mysore.
Thank you. And thank you, Gopal sir. I also make an observation, Dr. Rao. From the discussion, I only wish that this should have been gone as a material for the participants, because such a coherent presentation. But end of the day, whether it is the people invisibility or deliberately making invisible in the modern and the traditional context, the system of family was very much ruling them. So I may be progressive in my mind, but in the outside I am constrained to really showing my progressive thoughts, etc. And so irrational in my mind, but not really showing out. So because of the family constraints, where family is always pressurizing you to take forward the whatever is being taught in the generation to the next. So I think kind of one side individuality is very much required and transformation is required, but the system, I think culture, family is part of the culture. So this is the major constraint I feel as far as my understanding is concerned. Yes, respond to Gopal Singh and also to this, and I don't think that there are any other question. One question is there about compare C.V. Raman and G.D. Naidu. Yeah, and what is your view? That is what the question is.
Who is
I
the
think
best scientist?
Yeah, I'm very sorry that I do not have anything on CT Naidu. I'm very sorry about it. I cannot compare because I don't have much material on CT Naidu. I may be excused.
Okay, no issues.
Yeah.
Manimurgali, ma'am?
Yeah.
But your memory, the way that you have put the things, and the wonderful insight regarding subaltern men, really wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir, should I answer these questions or?
Please answer.
Okay.
You can respond to it.
Yeah. So about
we can wind up.
About the Manu restrictions in the modern times are not being institutionalized. It's actually not visible. They are institutionalized, not visible. In a sense, as I told you, civilizational standards do not allow them to be visible. They have to be hidden. So in the rule or framing the rule, who forms the regulations and rules of monopolization? So therefore you cannot build a structure, say this is how I discriminate you, this is the structure of discrimination. So visibility makes them feel socially guilt or criminal. So therefore, that they make it, camouflage the institutions or institutionalization with with the ability they have of framing the rules and regulations. That's how I believe. Second, family, yes, of course, family is very important. I think, see, as long as we do not make the efforts to reform the family within, we carry on with the meaning and the functions of the family that is given to us. But there is a huge scope and opportunity for us to reform the family, where when you reform the family through the very idea of family, in which everybody need to be reformed: daughter, son, husband, and if it is joint family, even the granddaughter, grandmother also should be targeted of continuously talking with them, like this is your older times, today you cannot do that. So this talking helps, I believe. So we cannot cite anymore, like Lata Chandrasekhar sacrificed her career for her husband is different. That is at that point in time. If there is a scientist sacrificing her career today, husband need to talk about, but husband, what kind of husband he is, we do not know. But however, we have to make an attempt to reform the family first. I think it has to start from family for a woman to feel comfortable. And honestly, for one thing, I feel very astonished and surprised and saddened is that, hello. Hello?
Yes, sir, you're audible, sir. Yes, sir, you're audible.
So
Jennifer is presenting. I don't know. Some pictures have come.
Yeah. She is showing the pictures of women engineers who participated in the Chandrayaan-2 launching and successful. And one of them are directors. One woman is from, of course, from Tamil Nadu. Two, I think, Billy. So I know that picture. I know that I could not have the time to bring it in, but this is celebrated as something that is, unbelievable. That idea of unbelievability. See, when a woman,
Exactly.
does something, why should we celebrate? Why don't we feel normal? That we do not allow ourselves to be normal. When a Dalit become a judge or a police officer or an IPS officer, it is something to becomes a news and discussion and debate. Why the hell? So still that is happening means we are long way to go. We have to feel ashamed of ourselves. So that is the big thing. So concludingly, I would say that we have not changed much. That is the point I wanted to make.
Yeah, yes, sir. Excuse me, sir. Ma'am,
Yeah.
I just wanted to
Jennifer.
make some observation regarding that photograph, ma'am. Actually,
please go.
if you look at this particular picture, which actually changed the entire like understanding or the projection of media on how a woman scientist will be. So one woman is seeing wearing this jasmine flower, like it is glorifying the women scientists, whomever how much ever they go up, they still have to be limited themselves in the traditional boundaries. Just wanted to make you to make some comments.
You can read a lot into that.
Rao reminded of our own VC.
Yeah, anyway.
Have to done away with, but there is a formal vote of thanks. Dr. Murugeshwari is there by chance?
No, ma'am, I
She
will
said
propose, ma'am.
Okay,
Yes,
no problem. Yeah,
Yes,
I'll
ma'am.
just conclude also. If I to please give me 1 more minute, then you will.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So good.
It's not audible. It is not audible.
Sorry,
Yes, yes,
I
yes, ma'am.
muted. So 2 things I want to share here, taking back to that indigenous or classical, sorry, whatever. 2 important aspects I want to, how women are on the one hand to be rationalistic, doing science, but at the same time still regressive. I recently I had 2 points, but I have only 1 point coming to my mind now. This flower sellers, the street vendors. I'm doing a project on sanitation access for women at workplaces. Street vendors are one category, where you can see that flower vendors or the other vegetable vendors, etc., they are straight getting the flowers and taking to the temple. but these women will be menstruating, because I think you quoted one example of how that craft man was not allowing the daughter and the son, saying that it is holy, it is going to the music instruments, etc. There it occurred to me. So it is somehow not recognized that the menstruating women will be selling the flower, and these flowers are taken to the temple, because I shouldn't even discuss here this. It shouldn't end up with a problem. But see, when it comes to economics, that is why I wanted to say also this point, where you are saying that the men are still the masters, and in the middle class, of course, the declining economic participation you must be aware of among the women, and particularly in the middle class, they are making the women to give up their career. So it is not that sacrificing your career for the sake of your man doing research and getting Nobel Prize. But here, in now a new culture which is emerging as an economic student, I have been doing some kind of a discussion, interaction, research, where you find these middle class women giving up their career for the sake of family, wherein it is justified, saying that adequate income is there already with me, I am earning, and you may not have to go. So the women are obliging to it. So how to compare this Lalita Chandrasekhar with this category? That is also a question. So two extremes. See, here the flower vendors do not mind selling flowers, which is directly going to the church or the temple, where though people are in one of the other contexts where 5 days you are asked to take leave for the domestic servant. So particularly in the Brahmin family, that is being that women will not be paid for the 5 days. So this extreme is there, and here the flower vendors are not don't mind at all. So thanks to that kind of insensitivity, shouldn't be sensitive, and that is why they are. So that is what the subalterns are in their own way. They are progressive, I should say. At least economic vulnerability contributes to that. And at the same time, when you move on the ladder, you likely to give up your career, where your question of gender and other things doesn't arise, but it is the family. So I think these are the issues which we need to really further dwell upon. And now I leave it to Dr. Neela to conclude.
Thank you, ma'am.
Neela ma'am, is it recorded?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, yes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
It will be shared also, Dr.
Okay,
Rao.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Very good afternoon to all. I am Dr. Neela, NSS Program Officer and Associate Professor of Business Administration, here to present today's vote of thanks. First of all, I would like to thank today's eminent resource person, Dr. Srinivasa Rao, Head Department of History, Badass University, Trichy, for his enlightened speech and thought-provoking words about the understanding layers of discrimination in India's science and technology in a gender and the sub-pattern perspective. Thank you very much, sir, for your gracious presence and made a session a valid one. Thank you very much, sir. The pleasure is mine in thanking our dynamic Madam Principal, Dr. Mrs. V. Sujata, for her continuous support and encouragement throughout the program. I take this opportunity to thank the coordinators of today's program, Dr. N. Manimegalai, Dean, Faculty of Arts, Director and Head, Department of Women's Studies, Badass University, Dr. N. Murugeshwari, Professor, Department of Women's Studies, Badass University, Dr. S. Shubha, Assistant Professor, Department of Women's Studies, Badass University, for their tireless effort and involvement to conduct this program in a successful manner. Thank you, ma'am. Without cooperation and active participants like you, this kind of program is impossible, that too for 1 month. I wholeheartedly thank all the participants across the country. Thank you, one and all. Meet you all tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Neela. So I also have a news to share, that the college students, for college students, classes will begin from August 3rd. Of course, there are colleges which are already conducting. So from August 3rd, we will be holding classes. Today it was announced by our Vice Chancellor. So it is applicable to Tamil Nadu government. Okay.
Get ready to be infected.
Okay, bye. Thank you, Dr. Rao.
Okay, thank you, madam.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you.